Hello folks and friends, and welcome back to the factory. So I guess this is no mystery now. Welcome to my Halloween repaint video, and today I'll be making the dancer of the Boreal Valley from Dark Souls. This doll was made as a part of a collaboration on Instagram called Beauty in the Beast. I will leave links in the description box below so you can take a look at what others have made, and trust me, there's so much amazing creative stuff there. But before I start, let me just address the elephant in the room. So, last year, I think it was last year, Moonlight Jewel did a Dark Souls 3 dolls too, and she made Aldrich, the Devourer of Gods. I am nowhere near Lisa's level of craftsmanship though, and a lot of the things that she has access to, I simply don't. But I think I'm still going to show you something really interesting nonetheless, and definitely a bit more budget material. Though if you haven't watched Elisa's Aldrich video, I highly recommend it, it's absolutely breathtaking. So, the dancer. This character is an unnamed woman that you fight as you progress in the game. She is known as a very tough boss. Her appearance is unsettling to say it simply, and her proportions are definitely inhumane. She has a very sad backstory too, and was basically forced into doing this. Even with that, she still remains extremely graceful and has a peculiar beauty about her that captivates. I have not fought her personally, but I've started playing the game recently still. Though if you wonder about the footage of the opening, well, it's actually my girlfriend. She rushed to the fight with a new character just for this video. I thought that seeing the dancer in action would give you a taste. Also, this is going to be a very intense repaint, and I might go over some details a bit quickly for the sake of time. But if you have questions, don't hesitate to let me know. Alright, let's go. I had this Frankie Monster High doll since a while now. I cut her apart over a year ago just to experiment and see how I could change her proportions and mod her. I forgot about it for a long time, but I think she could serve as a perfect base for today's project. I've already elongated her quite a bit and reconnected her with some epoxy sculpt. I was envisioning Spectra's face features for her though, so I decided to swap the head. I also did not feel like doing another blonde or white hair reroute, because I did so recently a few times, so I thought maybe brown could look good. Though despite her already existing mods, she was still not quite there for me, so I decided to elongate her arms and legs more, and I wanted to accentuate her arch back some more, and of course, give her a bit more curves. So yeah, that booty be legendary, so she kinda needs junk in her trunk. And I am absolutely not kidding when I say that the booty have its own fame. I love Spectra. She's one of my favorite Monster High dolls. And the shade of brown looked really good with her paper white skin tone, and I loved it. I wanted her to look frail and sad, a bit like an ethereal creature. And you saw it if you follow me on Instagram or on my YouTube community tab. I gave her a face-up that I absolutely love. And I did her some time ago, actually, before I did Uranus face to be precise. And with the fall weather here in Canada be really rainy, I take every low humidity window that I can to use MSC. Though, as you might guess, there's definitely something amiss here. So yeah, as much as I loved her, I went along with my planning and realized the head won't do at all. To get a little closer to the dancer's silhouette, a smaller head would look 10 times better. Though to be honest, I never had any intention to erase that face up. She could be used for another project after all. So yeah, I decided to shelve her and go back to the OG Frankie head. This is where I decided to give head shrinking a try for the first time. I'll leave a tutorial in the description box below if you are interested, but basically, I soaked the head in a solution of pure acetone and water for 2 sessions of 48 hours, with a complete dry time in between. The acetone inflates the head first, but as it dries it shrinks and becomes really hard. It's a little bit finicky, but I used the slow method to minimize risk and it gave me really great results. Do be careful though, when inflated, the vinyl becomes extremely soft and fragile. I also was not careful enough and some of my nail polish came off and stained her, but I decided not to worry about it too much because I wanted to paint over it to give her the same paper white skin tone I had with Spectra, so in the end it worked out. I went on and rerouted her before doing the face, as the vinyl was still a little bit pliable at this stage, but it would harden shortly after I finished. I also decided to do white after all. It made sense to me and it could work to make her look even more outworldly. Like usual, I am using 100% acrylic yarn, the Red Heart Super Saver brand, and I rerouted about a third of the holes as to give her thinner hair. I brushed the yarn until it stopped looking like instant ramen and flat ironed everything for realistic looking fibers. I used one of my big needles to define her part line and then I added a bit of extra yarn to it just to make sure the scalp underneath was not showing. I then used an eyebrow razor to give her a cute layered bob. The razor doesn't leave you with a blunt edge like the scissors would. After that, we jumped to the face up. I repainted the face with white acrylics, and then I primed her with 2 coats of Mr. Super Clear sealant. Once nice and dry, I was able to sketch her features, and then I grabbed a makeup brush with my soft pastels and started contouring and blushing her face. I am going for another worldly, tired and undead kind of look. But as the name of the collide implies, this is beauty inside the beast, so I wanted her to have a beautiful face under her armor. Of course, I am a little bit sad that I'm not using Spectra after all, but I guess I could have. Well, since I have more of these in my stock box, but I love Frankie's features too, and I think I made the right choice after all. I'm trying to mix a little bit of cold tones in the contour shade, just so she looks not quite alive but still don't look too dead, if that makes sense. My brown is more cool toned and the pink I ended up using is too. Again, I wanted her to look sad and innocent. And this is something a little ironic considering she's such a hard photo face. But yeah, I realized that I just love dolls with those sorts of expressions, so maybe it's becoming part of my style. Anyways, I usually give 2 or 3 layers for the blushing, and I sketch the eyebrows with pastels first, as it's way easier to shape and erase them. Like usual, the colors are always more faint at first, but it will build in intensity as you layer. The sealant will also give you progressively a better texture to work on. Once I'm good with the pastel work, I switch to my watercolor pencils and I start defining sharp lines and details. I tend to start with less intense pigment like brown and slowly work my way towards more forgiving colors like black. Each time the color stops building, and this goes for pastels too, I give her a new thin coat of MSC and I let it dry for at least a good 20 minutes and then I can resume. You will also feel as you go and add more sealant that you can layer gradients and even use some light colors over dark ones successfully. This is something you can start picking up by feel as you keep using Mr. Super Clear on vinyl. Practice definitely makes, well, experience. MSC is often hailed as the best because it is really good at everything that I just talked about. Though it is toxic like any aerosol, so please, consider spraying outside with a mask on. But don't let the fear keep you, it is worth the effort. If you have trouble with texture though, usually it means one of 3 things. You sprayed too thick, you haven't let it dry long enough, which can happen if you spray too thick, or the weather is against you. MSC usually likes warm temperature and low humidity. I never had issues with the summer's heat, but when I have to spray in the winter, I warm up the can against my body on low humidity days. And yeah, it works well. It's not safe to expose any aerosol can to direct heat, so please be careful. My regular pencil sharpeners tends to eat through my pencils, in part because they are really soft and break their tip easily, so I try to keep my artist knife handy on the side to sharpen the tips when I need to. You really want to keep your pencil work sharp and precise. For the dancer's face, I'm going for golden eyes, even though I think it's hinted at them being blue, but oh wells. I wanted a very high contrast in her eyes with some shadows on her scleras and around the irises, so I used a bit more black this time. Of course, a face-up is a process of repetitions for a lot of details, so I'm going back and forth on a lot of details. This may seem a little chaotic, I guess, from an outside perspective, but I'm really just reinforcing what's there. I wanted her lips to look like they're bitten or bloody a little bit, so well, very soft with some texture and with darker pigment in the middle. I think I love the lips on this texture a bit more, but those aren't bad, I still like them. Inspired by some amazing artists like Jackie O, I decided to try and give her some small blue veins, but I guess I did not understand exactly how I wanted them to be, so this was an experience, I'm just gonna say that. Once I'm happy with the pencil work, I switch to my watercolor paints for the finishing touches. I mostly add a bit more texture and use black and white to reinforce some contrasts and add details like the catch lights in the eyes. It really starts to show, well, how tiny the head is, no? I wasn't sure if I would like it, to be honest, but yeah, it's because I love Monster High, because they're these amazing sculpts and there's all this space, but I must admit it was giving me life, so yeah, I think I'll start shrinking more heads. This sounds so weird out of context, but yeah, you get my meaning. And just like that she's done, we can then go back to her body. I'll add though that I did use gloss on her face, but only on the lips. So, her body. I made new cuts with my Dremel tool and started reconnecting the pieces with hot glue and thick metal wire. Also because I wanted her to have that long bendy neck, I went on and installed the knee joint of another doll and glued it to her neck. And yes, that's the same doll who donated her arms this summer, so yeah, she keeps on giving, I guess. I'm also testing her range of movements often because I want to do my best to not lose any. I bulked up around the wires with masking tape to save on clay later on. I did that both because my clay is old and starts to be really hard to work with, but also to keep her as lightweight as possible. I gave her a rough pass with epoxy sculpt, which is an air dry clay, the one I'm using. It's just to make sure that things were in place. I did not care about it to be perfect as long as the proportions were matching my expectations. Not only do I hate sanding, but I figured she was going to be permanently covered in armor, so I made my choice. I still did use my Dremel to perfect the shape, so yeah, there was that. To clean the body, I just used a bit of rubbing alcohol. Do not use acetone, it will melt the plastic. There's a limit of how much curves you can have without losing movement or shape, so I decided to get inspired by drag queens and grab some foam to make her hip and butt pads, channeling my inner Moriah Elizabeth for it. I'm a big Drag Race fan, by the way. Are you? I am hot gluing these permanently on her body. I think she looks fine with these on, and well, what do you think? Just as a base, I painted the whole body in black, but this was not the most necessary step. What I did that was necessary was to sew her a pair of tight pants and tight long sleeves shirt, both in black. I will be gluing an armor on it. And of course cat hair makes its way on absolutely everything that I own. So yeah. To make the fit as perfect as I wanted it to, and show off the best of her curves, after putting the pants on her body, I used a ladder stitch along the seam lines to tighten some areas. I did the same with her long sleeve shirt, and then I used a whip stitch to join them together to make sure things won't move around. Funny enough, those foam pads can double as pin cushions. Alright now, to make that armor fit as perfect as I can, I am using a technique that involves wrapping the doll in kitchen plastic film to protect it and cover it with masking tape. You can then draw your pattern directly on the tape. The thickness of the plastic and tape duo should compensate normally for the thickness of the material you plan on using for whatever you are making the pattern for. You can then cut it carefully, preferably on a seam line, and you have your raw shape. You can then transfer it on paper and add details and test for the fit. It's also the best time to make sure that you have symmetry if it's something you have to watch for. For my armor, I will be using a very inexpensive and underrated material, craft foam. It's so versatile I'm surprised it's not used more often, to be honest. I mean, Worbla is fantastic and probably better in some cases, but let's be honest, it's extremely expensive. If you can afford it, be my guest, it's absolutely amazing. I have some at home too, but it's scraps that I've been donated, and I would not have had enough of one kind to build a whole doll armor. I am transferring the shapes of the armor on the foam, and I will again test for fitting a few times because this is still thicker than fabric and I want to make sure that it fits nicely and this is as best as I can make it to be. And then I will be using one perfect piece to fashion its twin, making sure in the process that I don't leave much undesirable indents. I will then repeat this process on all the body, trying to get the whole armor or at least most of it done at this stage. I know we probably add details as I go, but I still wanted to have a base that I can look and I can touch as I progress. As a side note, you see me draw with pens on the masking tape, but I'm purposely only using graphite on the foam. It's because the ink may react with the paint later on. Just a tip from past mistakes. I wanted to show you this piece there, because it looks a little strange. This is the bust area, and it is cut in a way to allow it to go around the arms on the shoulders. There's also some triangular shapes cut at the bottom, and these are to allow the foam to shape nicely on top of her bust. She doesn't have much breasts, but they still exist. Of course, I do label all the foam pieces as I go with some masking tape, just to make sure I don't get lost into a sea of foam bits. So I had a strange idea and decided to give it a go. Foam without texture would look pretty flat, but here I have a wood burning iron. Foam is extremely delicate and would burn easily, but it also reacts kinda well to a bit of heat, so yeah, I started going at the ridges with my tool, and I tested on scraps before just to make sure I don't ruin my work, especially since my tool doesn't have a temperature control button. After I am done texturing, I start painting. I will paint her armor with some silver that I want to mix with a tiny amount of metallic blue, but before I can do that I will prime the foam with black acrylic. You could also use gesso. The metallic paint really makes the detailing worth it in my opinion, and the black just makes the silver pop so well. I did some dry brushing on some edges with a bit of straight up metallic blue, but to create highlights, I mixed a tiny amount of white paint with some mud podge and pearl white mica powders. And as you noticed, I'm a very hands-on kind of artist. No wonder why my nail polish doesn't hold that well. Once I am done repainting, I simply hot glue the armor pieces on the fabric. It is as simple as that. That is how it looks so far, without the hip pieces, the gauntlets and the boots. I am taking this time to add more definition to the armor and details and retouch any areas that I don't like to add more contrast and, well, everything that I feel like adding. When I'm happy with it, I will use matte mud podge as a varnish. And I was that deep into it when I decided that the silhouette was too proportionate. Well, I mean, the dancer is scary long and thin, and she has very low knees, and I think I translated it not too bad, but the arms are just, they look a bit too normal, so I just ripped them out, fabric and all, and see if I could do something about it. I don't have a tiny drill bit, so I tried my best to add holes to attach some wire into the arms with super glue and make it as solid as I can. I used the tip of my artist knife for this. I finished the arms with a bit of foam and black paint and decided this was good enough to use as a base to put new pieces of armor on. And with all of that, I thought that it did it for the silhouette, but looking back at it now, I wish I have done even more dramatic mods. I still love my doll regardless, but that's that. After that was done, I kept adding the missing details and also looking at the seam lines and the foam, patch it when I can with more foam and some hot glue. Now the hips. She has some fabric hanging and I wanted to add this first before gluing her hip armor pieces. I stitched those fabric pieces on her bodysuit for strength. Then I added the belt and kept going on over all the details that I could to try to polish the thing as much as I could. I know my armor is not perfectly referenced and accurate, but it was close enough for me and honestly I think she is still recognizable. Also, to give her those flowing veils of fabric, I used some light blue chiffon, which I think is really chiffon, and I sewed them directly on her back under a small piece of armor. I added even more details and some gold chains, and I think she's getting pretty close to completion. Well, the body is at least. We are still not done with the video, there's still 10 minutes to go on still after all. Okay, so putting her head back was a challenge. I did not want to do a second Neptune incident after all. Though this time, the head is hard, so I actually had to cut some of the neck peg, but once it was in place, she is actually very secure. Here, I'm holding her by the head as proof. I'm so happy with how the head looks on this body. Okay, now the most challenging part of the whole thing is the helmet, and I'm sparing you a lot of trials and error because this was hard and I was reconsidering my whole life at some point. At first I considered using that metal thing that I think came out from some wine bottle, but no, it really did not help. I used some foam, once again, and I heated it using my heat gun so I could put it on the head and push it and kinda try to mold or shape into it as much as I can. When I started to get a decent shape, I turned to the front of the mask, which is adorned with metal bars that kind of form a wave shape. It's a bit hard to describe in words, but yeah, I used thinner metal for the bars and I hot glued them to a thicker base that would be near chin. The reason why I am using hot glue is because I tried wrapping the metal and the one that I have is just so hard it doesn't work well, and this one stay in a nice shape, and even with pliers I almost hurt myself, so 0 out of 10 would not recommend. Maybe if you have a better wire, like softer, mine's from the hardware store, but if you could get nice jewelry wire, that could be probably way better. To round the shape of the base of the helmet, I used the same principle as I did on our armor, with removing triangular shapes and closing them. I did it as many times as I felt like it until I was happy with the overall look. I also used hot glue on the inside to reinforce some spots and making it keep some more rounded shapes. Then I finished with gluing the front piece on, and I made sure it was strong and secure. I used the tape on it there to help the pieces keep together as I glued them. Just as a safeguard, it's probably a bit extra, but yeah, I wanted to be extra safe. Once it fits perfectly well to my taste, I give it a coat of black paint as a base, just like I did with almost everything in this project. Once dry and protected with some matte Mod Podge, I look into pieces of dark blue fabric and some more light blue chiffon to add to it. I did a few M's on the front to keep things clean, but I purposely left a lot of the edges of the chiffon raw, just to add to the fact that she's been fighting and it's probably old and probably also had bits ripped out. Ugh, pronunciation. I finished with golden chains, and I made a crown in foam to add to it. I did it the same way that I did our armor. But to decorate it, I used gems in place of highlight. I think it looks really nice like this. And here I'm trying to show that I actually glued a little panel of black tulle inside of the helmet. This was actually super hard to install at the end, so if you do something similar, glue the tulle before joining the front to the whole mask. I was swearing like a sailor for a bit there. Now, I can't do a powerful boss without its iconic weapons now, can I? So yeah, the last thing I did was her sword. I drew a model of them to scale on a piece of paper, and then I went foraging in my recycle bin for, well, a thin but sturdy piece of cardboard. That's going to be good enough. I am going to transfer the drawing on it, and I'll get 4 copies of this blade, because I'm going to double it for strength. I'm not using foam because it's, well, too soft and too thick. To fashion the handles, I took a small length of a wooden dowel and I cut a slit in the middle. But please, don't do it in the angle I was using. It's a recipe for injuries. I did not injure myself, but that was still a very bad idea. I glued the handles with a touch of hot glue. Then I marked where I wanted to add bulk. I will use strips of foam for that. Then I will try and go back and shape them with my wood burning tool and a bit with the nozzle of my glue gun. It's actually a bit hard to see here, but I've added globs of hot glue for additional volume on the handle, and I textured the blade as well. It took me way more time and shades of paint to get this result, but that's what they look like after some paint job with metallic pigments. One is fire and the other is darkness. And that, my friends, is the end of this very long repaint video, and I am both exhausted and happy to present to you my result. I think this was a very ambitious project and I'm kinda happy I did it on a budget, so yeah, hopefully this gives you ideas. But now, before we close in on this year's Halloween video, shall we dance? And that's it. That's my dancer of the Boreal Valley. I did not go over Dark Souls lore, but I highly recommend that you delve into it because it's so rich and complex. I cannot wait to play more of this amazing game. Next repaint video should be Cherry Bomb from Has Been Hotel, but I might take a short break just to rest a bit. But like usual, you'll be updated in my community tab and on my Instagram. But in the meantime, have a happy and scary Halloween. But most of all, stay safe.